Hi, this video today is to discuss movement trays and their use in Warhammer Fantasy Battle or any other tabletop wargame which uses large units of troops. Now, most of us who play Warhammer or any other game similar will be instantly familiar with this concept and will have seen many of these different movement trays in our time. They are either purchased where they come as a single piece of grey plastic or wood occasionally that then needs decorating to match your current basing style or to blend in with the basing style of your models that you've chosen, or the more capable hobbyists among us can build them ourselves. This one's manufactured out of bits of offcut sprue, some cereal packet, flock and paint, so they can be thrown together quite easily. However, they aren't a particularly good product and they're not a particularly good solution to a lot of the problems that come from gaming with large units of many separate figures. Obviously the principal idea is that it's easier to move this unit like that than it is to move every single model if they were all loose and separate. It's much quicker, it's much more effective. Yes, that's true. But there are a whole host of problems with these trays. The first and most obvious of these is that it's a single large piece. Okay, it's entirely inflexible in that it was created for this unit, 5 wide, 6 deep. Apart from putting different models which have a similar base size and want to be 5 wide and 6 deep, 30 in total, there's nothing else I can do with it. It is what it is. So that is the first problem. Secondly, we have the issue that as the game is played and models are removed as casualties, we are left with a large open expanse of unused movement tray, which then follows the unit about as it moves around the board. Now, apart from being just an eyesore, this again is also a gaming obstacle, because now other units have to move over this. If a unit wants to charge this unit in the rear, it's got to move over this empty blank expanse of movement tray, and it's generally just an annoyance. The other thing that's a problem with these movement trays is terrain. Because they're a single rigid piece, if you imagine there's a hill here where my hand is, you can see that the movement tray effectively forms a ramp against the side of whatever it's placed on or near. Now, if a unit wanted to charge into the side of these goblins here, there's going to be no base-to-base contact. This unit might be flat, this unit's at a precarious angle. How can you contact them up? How would you work out which models are attacking which? It becomes very difficult. Also, the issue might be models will just fall out of the tray. These are plastic, they're relatively light, so they're behaving themselves quite nicely. But if you imagine some of these figures were white metal, particularly the standard bearer here, it's not uncommon to see them just tipping forward straight out of a tray once you try and put it over a piece of terrain. And lastly, but not by all means least, is the fact that these, in terms of the main core of Warhammer is the close combat. And once units contact each other, it's very important to be able to work out which models are touching which other models, so that champions who have better profile and better attacks can be worked out which models they can attack, as they might want to kill other important characters, etc. Now, the problem with these bordered bases is that they make working out which model's in contact with which other model very difficult. Because if you imagine a scenario where you've got a unit here, and then this unit is charged into its front, and then you've got another unit here in this space that's charged into its front. So you've got 3 sets of these plasticky borders between all of the models. You're going to end up with a huge space where there's no model contact at all, and obviously even just putting your head over the directly above and then trying to work it out what they would be in contact with what, it's just unnecessarily cumbersome and generally irritating when all you want to do is get on with your game. So, having said that these aren't great, what alternatives are there? Well, something that's mentioned quite a lot on gaming forums and websites is the concept of this magnetic movement tray, and I've seen a number of different implementations on the internet and in various places. Some of them seem to me quite daft in that the simplest of them is to simply take a tray that's exactly the same as this, put metal in the base and a magnet on the model so that they stick to it, which means that the models won't fall out. And if you want to use the tray to store them in, I suppose that makes that a great option. But it keeps all of the problems that are inherent in these trays. I.e. they're one piece, they're inflexible, they create all this acreage of empty space once you start killing things. And actually they're a pain to butt up against each other and to actually use in terms of playing the game. This is a magnetic movement tray product that is much more elegant than some of the solutions you'll have seen, and is much more useful. Now, what we've got in this little bag is effectively a two-part kit. So we've got a tray, and then stuck to that tray by magnetism are some small metal squares. Okay, so essentially all we need to do is to rebase our figures on these metal squares and then stick them to this tray, and we're away. Okay, now why does this tray solve all of our problems? Well, going back to the things we discussed earlier, the visual element. If these trays are used to base these models, for example, you will have 10, 10, and then 10. So it'll be 3 separate blocks of models instead of 1. Now, admittedly, you've got to move each block separately or push them all together, so you've got 3 to move instead of 1, but 3 is still not 30. And it has the advantage that once 10 die, I just take the back piece away. So it shortens the unit up and you don't have this large board trailing everywhere. There aren't any borders, because if I place this model on here, you can see that once the models are actually based up, they are pretty much flush with the edge. So when this tray touches another movement tray of a similar type and style, those models will be in base-to-base contact effectively, and working out who's fighting who and when is going to be a lot easier. In terms of terrain, well, if our unit is split into 3 sections here, and say we cross a fence line or a hedge line, we can simply separate the 2 sections and have the hedge or fence run through the middle. We know for gaming purposes that the unit's all one unit, but it's fairly easy to implement in terms of gaming. To come back to our example that we used earlier of a hill, if we imagine this unit is in 3 sections, that front section might be on the foot of the hill flat on the ground, this section might be tilted at an angle on the side of the hill, and then the back section again may be flat on top of the hill at the back. So the unit effectively conforms to the contours of the terrain because it's in sections and not cast in one large single piece. So this product really does solve a lot of our problems. In terms of how we use it, it's an incredibly simple process. Okay, if I just take these squares off this board, when you take them out the bag, effectively all we need to do is do a couple of simple things before we just glue these squares to the bottom of our figures here. Okay, now the couple of things that I would advise you to do are, first of all, these are metal. They're relatively thin, and they might have sharp edges or little spurs, as is in the case with this one, of metal. So you might just want to have a look at them, inspect them, and file down any defects or sharp edges, because you don't want to cut yourself or scratch yourself when you're handling these things, or and playing with them. So there we go, just using a simple modeller's file, just tidy them up and check them over. The next thing is to make sure that they take the glue well, and we may also want to paint them later, which I'll discuss. We want to just wash them in some warm soapy water, which I've got here, and dry them off thoroughly. And there we go, all ready to go, finished. Now then, it's worth mentioning, obviously, these models are finished. This unit is ready to play, and we're now basing up retrospectively, if you like. But this process, these bases can be added at any point during your modelling process. So you can add these, glue these to the base prior to assembling your models. You can glue them to the base prior to painting. The choice is yours. It really makes absolutely no difference with using this product when they're done in the lifetime of a model. Okay, so we've cleaned it, we've removed any spurs or defects. What a tiny little spot of super glue. You really don't need any, hardly any at all. And then just seat the model on it. Now, as you can see, I've seated that model in it misaligned. And it might be that you do that, you can't exactly sit the model square at the first attempt. Now, it's worth mentioning, super glue, as I've used here, sticks to fingers very readily. So I find it easier to use something else to actually move the model, to just gently nudge it so that it sits nice and square on the base. Obviously, the bases you haven't yet used form a perfect tool for this purpose, but obviously once you get to the last one, you will need something else. And you can pretty much use anything you like that doesn't stick to super glue very readily. So pieces of plastic, card, a metal modelling file, even an old credit card or something like that you've got laying around at home. They make the ideal little squaring up tools just to make sure that that model is sat firmly on that base. Now, these models will fit fairly neatly onto the bases, but what I've found is, obviously, although these metal squares are precision manufactured to a high standard, cheap plastic Citadel bases aren't. So you might find some bases, when you've got them on there, will leave quite a bit of metal showing. Some will be really snug and there'll be hardly any metal visible underneath, because the bases, these plastic bases, can be up to 1mm either way in terms of the way the sizing, simply because that's the way they're made, and they don't need to be any more precise. So in the great tradition of Billy Peter, while we're waiting for the glue to go off on that particular model that I've just done, here are some I prepared earlier. So the front models on this unit have already been magnetised, and they've already got their base pieces on, as you can see there. So we can rank them up on this board here, like so. Ready for play. Oh, it's not. So there we go. Now, Night Goblins rebased on a magnetic movement tray with no interfering borders. Now, in terms of visual appearance, as you can see from the model we've just done, which is now dry, that base is quite visible. I've edged my models in black. Other players use green, brown, and a whole host of other colours. But then the metal really stands out in high contrast against it. So obviously what we're going to want to do is just repaint these just to hide the metal, which is obviously why I mentioned cleaning earlier. Because again, we want the paint to take really cleanly against that. Now, these ones you can see, I've already done that. I've just run a bit of black paint around them again, just to cover up that metal and make it less visible. And in terms of the final look, to be honest, that would be my playable unit, all finished, ready to go. I mean, you've got a whole host of options. If you want to, you can actually paint the edge of this movement tray. So you could paint it a different colour if you want. If your models are based in a different colour, the black that it actually comes out at matches mine nicely. But if it didn't, you could paint that with green paint or whatever, and it would take whatever look you were after. You could even paint it, which would allow you to then maybe differentiate different units on the battlefield. So if you've got a lot of Night Goblin archers and you've got 2 units of Night Goblin archers, but they happen to have a different magic weapon or a different champion, you could put one on, say, red-edged trays and the other on blue-edged trays, and then you can immediately, looking at them, tell the difference between your 2 units. A handy little gaming tool, in effect. So, great product. Highly recommend it. They are available in a number of formats. This is the 20mm square standard Warhammer infantry set. So you get your 40 by 100mm movement tray and then 10 metal square bases to attach your models to it. So that is used for humans, elves, dwarves, all forms of standard infantry in Warhammer. You've got the 25mm square version, which includes 10 of these and a movement tray 50mm by 125. So that would be for your larger infantry such as orcs, or I think it's Saurus Warriors, the Lizardmen unit, or similar. You have cavalry bases, 25mm by 50mm, again on a 50 by 125mm movement tray, so that's 1 model deep, 5 models wide, the 5 models being the full rank, and it allows you to then build units quite quickly, a rank at a time, and you've only got 1 tray to move for each rank. And last in the range is the 40mm square monstrous infantry base. Absolute boon for Ogre Kingdoms players out there. I've seen so many videos on the internet with massive Ogre Kingdoms units, which by turn 4 or 5 have got this huge trail of open movement trailing behind them. Looks awful and is a real pain in the backside to watch, let alone to play with. So the kit for this, you get 3 bases and a movement tray that's 40mm deep and 120mm wide. So it's effectively 1 rank of 3 models, which is your scoring rank for the rank bonus. So you can either have 1 or 2 side-by-side forms your horde rank for monstrous infantry. And that's it. Another thing that it's probably worth mentioning, of course, is that one of the nice things about this system is that at the moment the internet's abuzz with rumours that Warhammer may go to round bases in the future with 9th edition. Now, if that should happen, of course, it's worth mentioning that this system still works. Because effectively all you will do is attach a circular metal disc to your new model bases, and it will stick to the movement tray exactly the same. So you can take your models from whatever skirmish format we're using in version 9 and just rank them up on the movement tray exactly as you would do with square-based models. It makes no difference whatsoever. Anyway, I hope you found that interesting and useful. Where to buy these kits is listed in the description under the video, and I hope that you enjoy them and that they enhance your Warhammer gaming experience as much as they've enhanced mine. Thank you.